So good to see you here. And so my name is Andrea Provaglio, as you can see. That's what I do. I'm an Agile enterprise coach. I do stuff. So this is what I do. I work independently, always did, and I help organizations move into the 21st century. That's the way I describe myself these days, meaning that I do have a technical background. I've been into software, writing software, teaching people how to write software for a long time, but in the last 10, 12 years, I completely moved from silicon to carbon, as I say, so I moved from computers to people. And that's what I do. So we're going to talk about leadership. I do have a question. Why do you care about leadership? Why are you here? I'm sorry to wake you up, but it's a question. Why are you here? By the way, this stage is so tall. It's embarrassing. Yeah. What do you want to know about leadership? Why are you here? Why do you care about leadership? I'm sorry? Be better at leadership? Okay, and then we have someone here?
Yeah, I was going to say the same, to learn more about what actually my job is.
Okay.
Find challenging thoughts regarding status quo.
Okay, to have challenging ideas, thoughts about leadership. Thank you. One more. Anybody? Yes?
I'm actually satisfied with my current leadership, and I want to learn the program.
Okay. We're going to learn? Okay, good. Okay, good. So, thank you. I just wanted to have an idea about what you mean by leadership. So, let me tell you the approach I'm going to take today regarding leadership. So, I will start from the assumption that you care about delivering value. Is that right? Can I start from this assumption? Okay, good. Now, of course, value is a very abstract concept, because most people, when you talk about value, they think value is money. But of course, money is one dimension of value. Actually, we say that money is a store of value. It's not necessarily value per se. But there are other forms of value, like customer satisfaction, reputation. Learning is another form of value. Right? So value is a very complicated concept. But anyway, I will start from the assumption that you care about delivering value. Now, who delivers value? It's not you as an individual, it's your organization that delivers value. Because what we do these days is so complicated and complex that no single person can efficiently and effectively deliver value in a meaningful way. Well, you can. Maybe if you are a lone developer writing mobile apps, then you can do that. But most of the time, the problems that we face are so complex that we need teams, organizations, lots of people working on the same problem and deliver value. So your organization delivers value. And in which way your organization works? What determines the way in which the organization works? Leadership. Leadership in this context, the way I mean leadership, is the people who are most influential in the organization, and therefore they determine the way the organization works, and therefore they determine the way the organization produces value. So that's why leadership is so important. And leadership is not something that you learn from a book. Leadership is basically a mindset and a set of skills also, but it's primarily a mindset. So your mindset as a leader determines the way the organization works, which determines how you deliver value. So this is the kind of concept, the kind of a line of thought that I would like to follow for the next 45 minutes, more or less. So, talking about organizations, I have a question. Are you guys familiar with this book? Anybody has read this book, Reinventing Organizations by Frederic Laloux? One person, two, three, a few people. Okay, a few people. Thank you very much. So for the rest of you, what I'm going to do is give you a very brief introduction to a couple of concepts in this book. And the reason why I want to do that is because I need a vocabulary that you and I can share when we talk about organizations. Okay? So I'm not going to discuss the book, but I need a couple of concepts that we need to cooperate now. So the idea well, first of all, the reason why I like this book is because it's a collection of case studies. There are about 12 case studies in this book, each on a different organization, and these organizations can be very different: private sector, public sector, very small, very large, technical, healthcare, lots of stuff. And what Lalou did with these case studies was to try to understand why these organizations, they stand out compared to their competitors. And he came up with a few ideas. Actually, some of the ideas in the book he has adopted from other theories, so I mean, it's not entirely original, but anyway, I like the way it's presented. So the concept is that organizations developed in the history of humankind. And let me give you an example. Let me give you an analogy. If you take my brain, actually not my physical brain, but the structure of my brain, there are certain parts of the structure of my brain which are extremely old, very, very, very old, millions of years old. Everything that is related, for instance, to regulating my metabolism is extremely old in the structure of my brain. And everything that is related to survival or reproduction is a bit younger, but still very old. Other things like social skills is a bit more recent and old. And other things like logic are kind of recent in the history of mankind. So the idea is that my brain contains parts that can be very old in terms of their structure and very new. And we can think that this could be applied to organizations as well for a very simple reason. Organizations or companies, if you think about it, companies, they do not exist in nature. Can we agree on that? Companies do not exist in nature. Companies are a creation of the human mind. Therefore, they reflect the way the human mind works. Does it make sense? Good. So if you look at organizational development from this historical point of view, you can see that 100,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago, we had some kind of organizations, and then 1,000 years ago, we had other kind of organization, and so on, and so on, and so on. The other thing you may notice is that this scale is not linear. So apparently, there's been an acceleration in the evolution of organizations in the history of mankind. It's actually faster and faster. The other thing is you may notice that these organizational, let's say, styles or paradigms, they are being color-coded on a scale. And the idea is that there is no, it's a continuum. Okay, that's the idea of this color scale. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to describe a few of these organizational paradigms very quickly, and then we talk about leadership in this context. Is that okay? Good? You're still with me? Yes? Good. You guys in the back, you still with me? Good. Just checking. So, red organizations. Okay. When we say red organizations, we are saying that we are talking about organizations that are based on a very specific paradigm. And this paradigm, this metaphor, is the metaphor of the pack of wolves. And let me explain why we say that the paradigm is a pack of wolves. Let's take a kind of organization that still exists today, street gangs. Let's take street gangs. Now, a street gang is an organization. It's a group of people who share a common purpose. That's an organization, right? A group of people who share a common purpose. Right? Good. Now, in this kind of organization, usually, the dynamic or the trust relationships, where's Mark, are very, very simple. Either you are the boss or you are not. Very simple. Either you dominate or you're being dominated. And you stay the boss until somebody kills you and take your place. Very simple. So these kind of organizations are kept together primarily by fear. That's the way these organizations are kept together. That's the glue, fear, okay? And power, and violence, and so on and so on. However, these kind of organizations have produced a couple of concepts that we still use in organizations, like division of labor is one, division of labor, because you're either dominated or you dominate. So if I dominate, you say what I do. You do what I say. So if I dominate, okay, you do what I say. It's a division of labor. And you do that, and you do that, and you do that. Division of labor. Very simple. Effective, simple. And also command of authority, clearly. Okay? So that's a brief introduction to red organizations. Let's move to amber, another color. Now, the metaphor of amber organizations, as you can see, is the metaphor of the army. Now, not the military, especially not the military today. The military today, they can do excellent things in terms of dealing with complexity. All the VUCA concept and having heuristics on the battlefield and so on and so on and so on. Very, very sophisticated. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the army in the most traditional way, in the sense of a rigid hierarchy. Rigid hierarchy where it's very well defined what's your authority, what's your responsibility, and so on and so on and so on. An example of this, let's say for instance public school systems. If you think at universities today, of course, they do different things than 500 years ago, but the structure of a university, the organizational structure is not very different from 500 years ago, right? And in fact, universities, they take pride in their history, right? They take pride in preserving the past, repeating the past. Is that right? There is this strong concept of tradition in a university, right? So repeating the past, maintaining the status quo is very important in this kind of organizations. Most churches work the same way. In a church, it's very clear what a hierarchy is, it's very clear what the rules are, and by the way, if you do not follow the rules, we punish you, right? In these kind of organizations, if you break the code, not the code, but the behavioral code, okay? If you break the code, if you break the law, we punish you. You're an heretic, for instance. In churches, right? I'm Italian, and I know that Catholic Church killed quite a lot of people because they didn't like how they thought, right? Because they are heretics. So this is the kind of organization. So with this kind of organizations, what you have is very clear hierarchies and processes, because processes are a way of repeating the past. Very well-defined process. Keep doing that, keep doing that, keep doing that. Most rituals in churches are just processes that we repeat over and over and over and over for centuries. Right? Does it make sense? Amber organizations. Now, let's move to a more recent type of organization. This one, orange organization. Now, it's very likely that 90% of this room is working in an orange organization, because orange organizations are basically children of the Industrial Revolution. And the idea is that the organization, the metaphor is that the organization is like a very well-oiled, very efficient machine. And people are just gears in this machine. And that's the reason why you start measuring individual productivity, for instance. You start giving bonuses to individuals if they perform better, if they meet objectives. If you are efficient, then we reward you. It's different from amber. If you don't do what I say, you get a stick. In an orange organization, if you do what I say, you get a carrot. Right? So this is the concept. So efficiency and competition, of course, because you want to be efficient, because you need to compete against your competitors. Innovation, accountability, because I need to give you a carrot if you do what I say. Stuff like that. It's very, I know, isn't this so sad? I mean, I can feel the sadness in this room. You guys are saying, oh, damn, that's so right. That's what, oh, that's terrible. No, come on, there's hope, believe me. Okay. So these are orange organizations. Then again, it's very possible that 90% of you are working in an orange organization these days, because it's very, very common. There's a more recent type of organization, and the metaphor for this kind of organization, for green organizations, is the metaphor of a family. Now, in family I'm not talking about family-owned companies, which of course could be an example, but not necessarily. I'm talking about companies where the bonding, the relationships between people is even more important than roles, processes, hierarchies, and so on and so on and so on. I'm not saying that green organizations, they do not have hierarchies and processes and so on. I'm just saying that the bonds that people create are even more important than that. And you can see that, for instance, in startups. When you have a small startup founded by a bunch of friends, like high school friends, and they put together a startup, the bonding is more important than formal roles. And you still have formal roles, because every company must have a CEO by law. It's required by law, right? But still, it's not that the most important part. I'm not saying that green organizations are necessarily good or bad, because remember, in the same way that families can be extremely dysfunctional, green organization can be extremely dysfunctional, or can be very functional, depending, right? So it's not necessarily a good or bad thing. These kind of organizations usually are kept together by strong values. Like in family, we stick together because we believe in the same things, because we share the same set of common values. And that's why we stick together. And these values could be of any kind. Could be servicing the planet, could be whatever, right? In these kind of organizations, you have empowerment. What does it mean? Empowerment means that even though I do have authority, I trust you because I have a bond with you, I trust you, and so I empower you to do stuff. You have the power to decide. And you're not accountable. You have the power to decide. Or multiple stakeholders model. Usually, these kind of organizations, they understand that they are interconnected with a larger system. So it's not just a matter of keeping happy the person or the organization who pays you, but, for instance, they care about social issues or political issues, financial issues, so they have this sense of being part of something bigger. And these are green organizations. Now, a few comments before we move on. Comment number one. As you can see, no organization is monocolor. Remember, I was just oversimplifying when I was talking about green, orange, red, and amber organization. No organization is of one single color. In the same way that no person is of one single color. I could be extremely red when it comes to sports, and then I can be very green when it comes to friendship. Right? So no person is monocolor, and no organization is monocolor. If you go talking to a multinational and you talk to the legal department, it's quite likely that they are very amber, legal. But if you talk to research and development, they could be very orange. Right? So depends on who you talk to. Still, in every organization, you can kind of feel what is the dominant color. Okay? In every organization, you can feel that. Now, the other thing is, no stage is good or bad. Each stage is just adapted to a different context. Remember, it's just adapted to a different context. That is why it's called evolutionary organizational development, because 10,000 years ago, we had different problems that we have today. So for that context, it was very well adapted. And the other thing is that in the same way that my brain has evolved, but still includes very old parts, and I need these very old parts, every new paradigm includes the previous ones. So if you're talking about green organizations, there is still a red component, there is still an amber component, there is still an orange component. There are just different layers in this organization. So no one of these stages is necessarily good or bad. Now, a type of organization that we are starting to see, that's starting to appear, is what we call Teal organizations, Teal. And teal is a color. We are not really sure which is the best metaphor to represent teal, but usually we talk about living systems. So organizations that are like living systems. Now, if you think about it, most multinationals or most companies today are orange, which means that the underlying concept is mechanical. Division of labor, roles, procedures, efficiency, and rewards, and stuff like that. Teal is not mechanical, is organic, meaning that we consider the organization as a living organism that is constantly evolving depending on how it interacts with the external world and how it works internally. So it's a constant questioning, what do we want to be? How can we serve our larger system? And so on and so on and so on. In these kind of organizations, usually you see some things like people are perfectly able to self-manage. Let me give you an example. One of the companies that are described in the book is a company in the Netherlands. It's actually an organization in the Netherlands. And what they do is they provide health care at home for elderly people. So they provide health care at home. And they have about 7,000 people on the field and 50 people in the headquarters. So let me translate this. It's like a company, it's like an IT company with 7,000 developers and 50 managers. Can you imagine that? Okay? A software development company with 7,000 technical people, developers, and 50 managers. Clearly, these 7,000, they know what they have to do. They are perfectly able to self-manage, self-organize, and make decisions together, and they don't need this kind of supervision, mechanical, hierarchical supervision. They know what is right, and they can work together. They can self-manage. That's the one thing. The other thing is this idea of wholeness, meaning that most of the time when we go to work, we wear a professional mask. Basically, we don't bring all of ourselves into work. And that's a pity, especially with the kind of intellectual work that we do. It's a pity that we lose things like creativity, intuition, emotional intelligence, fun, humor, and stuff like that. It's such a pity that we lose these kind of essential traits of the human being because we are trained to wear a professional mask when we go to work. And this is not going to happen in Teal organizations. We respect the individual, as the entire individual. Okay? So these kind of things. You can see here there's a loosening of own ego. I'm not talking about abandoning the ego. I'm not talking about a spiritual path in which you abandon the ego and you become one with the universe. I'm not talking about that. But I'm talking about understanding that you are just part of something bigger. Understanding that you are part of something bigger. Good. So let's move on. Why am I talking about Teal organizations connected to leadership? Now, I assume that this is an IT conference, so I assume that you guys practice some form of Agile, one way or another. Or maybe you think so. I'm kidding. So if you practice some form of Agile, you have seen the Agile Manifesto. You know that in the Agile, this is kind of old, because this was written 16 years ago, and in fact, I'm going to make 2 changes. Now, hold tight. Okay, I've just updated the manifesto. Okay, so what I did is instead of working software, here we have working product, which is more contemporary, considering that we use Agile to develop fighter jets prototypes. Okay, so working product. And stakeholders collaboration, not customer, not only who pays you, but whoever is affected by your product. Okay, good. Couple of updates. Now, in the Agile Manifesto, we say that these things on the right are important, and these things on the left are even more important. That's what we say, right? So, for instance, processes and tools are extremely important for what we do, and individuals and interactions are even more important. Good. So the question I asked myself was, okay, so if I wanted to put colors on the manifesto, on the values of the Agile Manifesto, what those would be. So let's take, for instance, processes and tools. Okay, process, amber, right? By definition, a process is amber. Tools we use to be more efficient, so orange. Processes and tools, amber and orange. Good. How about individuals and interactions? Most likely, teal and green. Does it make sense? So what we are saying is that the first value of the Agile Manifesto implies that we need to shift from this kind of mindset amber and orange, and we need to shift, still including that one, but we need to shift to a teal and green mindset. That's what it's implying, right? And remember that mindset determines leadership. So I hope you're starting to see the connection. Comprehensive documentation. Well, documentation is like the Bible is amber, so amber. Okay, period. Working product. Well, first of all, it must be working, so it's orange. And second, it must be a product that somebody needs, somebody likes, so it's teal. It's for the larger system. Contract negotiation. Well, contract is another Bible, and so it's amber. And in my opinion, there's a little bit of red in the way we do contract negotiation most of the time, because not always, but most of the time, contract negotiation is something like, so I'm the customer, I have lots of money, and you are a supplier, I can find 10 other suppliers like you, so you do what I say. And that's a contract negotiation. Either you dominate or you're being dominated. So, little bit of red. Okay? Not always, but has it ever happened to you? Have you ever seen this kind of negotiation? I have the money, you do what I say. Okay? Dominate or being dominated. On the other hand, stakeholders' collaboration, by definition, is teal and green. Following a plan, amber. Sticking to a plan, okay? Following a plan, amber. Process, repetition. And responding to change. Well, for me, remember, in Agile, we respond to change. We don't change out of whim. Okay, today we want to try something new. No, that's not a thing. You respond to change. You change the plan every time every time that the reality tells you that your old plan is no longer valid, because now you have more information than you had when you made the plan. Now you have better information, you respond to that better information, and you change. But you change because you want to have an advantage from changing. It's efficiency. And it's also for a larger purpose. So, how's it going so far? You okay? Still with me? Okay. Okay, good. I'm just checking the time. I'm sorry, I'm just joking because it's a lot of stuff. I understand it's a lot of stuff for a short talk. Anyway, why is this relevant to leadership? Remember my first slide? I told you that mindset determines leadership, leadership determines how the organization works, and that determines how you generate value. Okay? So leadership and mindset actually is at the beginning of this chain. Now, what Ledoux suggests, and that makes sense to me, is that the stage at which an organization can operate is determined by the stage of its leadership, because leaders are the most influential people in the organization. So if the most influential people in the organization have an amber mindset, primarily amber mindset, guess what color the company could be if the most influential people have an amber mindset, right? Does that make sense? Yeah? Good. So we need to talk about leadership. We need to talk about changing leadership in a certain way. Which is, by the way, what I've been working on for the last 4 years. So I just want to make a quick distinction now between management and leadership. Now, first of all, I find it much more useful not to talk about managers and leaders, but talk about management and leadership. Talking about the activity, not the persons. Okay? So I'd like to use the words from Seth Godin here, from a book called The Tribes, to define what is management and what is leadership. There are hundreds of different definitions out there about what's management and leadership. I chose this one because I like it. So management is about manipulating resources to get a known job done. So what are these resources? I'm not talking about people. I'm a 21st century coach, and I don't talk about people using the word resource. Okay? So what are these resources? Resources could be, well, time, money, infrastructure, legal agreements, everything. Everything that you can buy or sell, that's a resource, right? I'm not talking about people. So management is about manipulating these resources to get a known job done. We know we have to do something, and we are going to use our resources in a certain way to achieve that. And I, as a manager, I am responsible for how I use these resources. And it's a big responsibility. When a manager signs a legal agreement, that's a big responsibility, right? Or when he spends 500 million euros of a budget, that's a big responsibility. So we need good managers. But we also need to understand what is management, at least in this context. The thing about managers and management is that managers have reports. So managers, because they have big responsibilities, they also have big authority. So they operate by authority, and they expect accountability from people that do what they are told to do, because they are accountable for what they do, right? So managers have reports. Leadership, on the other hand, is defined in this way. Leadership is about creating change you believe in. Leadership is about creating change you believe in. Leadership is about creating change you believe in. Leadership is about influencing your environment. It's about bringing change about. It's about not having people who follow orders, but people who follow you because they want to. Leaders have followers. Managers have reports. It's a very different concept. Very different concept. Leadership creates change. Management can also create change by manipulating resources, but leadership creates change by influencing people. And that's regardless of your official position in the company. It's not about status, it's about influencing people in a certain way, being able to have people follow you. Now, I'm not saying that these two things are, actually what I'm saying is this. I'm saying that if you want to bring about change in an organization, you do need these two forces, the force of management and the force of leadership, to be aligned. Now, it's very nice when these two things coincide on the same person. Sometimes we find excellent managers who are also excellent leaders. But honestly, that doesn't happen very frequently. Okay. What I see most often is very good managers with very poor leadership skills, or very good leaders who have zero authority in the company. Almost zero authority in the company. Is that right? Do you see that as well? Very good managers that can exercise authority, but they have no leadership skills. People do not follow them, they take orders. Different story. Or very good leaders who decided not to, or it didn't happen, to have a formal position in the company. Is that okay? Do you see what I mean? Yeah. Hello. Let me check. You guys in the back, are you okay? Yes. Good. Thank you, guys. Good. Just check. You guys in the front? You in the middle? Good. Left? Right? Okay. Covered. So what I'm suggesting is that if you want to use your leadership effectively, you also need to have support from management and vice versa. That's what I'm suggesting. Now, let me ask you a question. I assume that you are practicing some form of Agile, or you think you are doing so. So if we were to talk about leadership in our context, leadership in IT, leadership in an Agile company, because of course leadership for a orchestra director is very different from leadership in an IT company, right? Okay, so let's talk about what we do. So what is Agile leadership? Well, first of all, let me tell you that it's definitely not what this guy is doing. Okay, this is not an example of Agile leadership. And let's try to see why. Okay, how many metaphors about leadership you can see in this picture that probably do not fit in what we do? I'm sorry? Oh, being brave. Yes, being brave. Yes, the hero and so on. What else? What do you see? No other people. The guy is alone, right? The guy is alone and he's a hero. And violence or force in general, yeah. The sword and fighting against the dragon. You can see the fire coming. And what else? It's not a unicorn, which is kind of depressing. Yeah. Anything else? I'm sorry? Yes, you need protection, and you want to protect somebody and protect yourself, and so on. And yeah, there's a castle here, yeah, and the guy is out there doing stuff. And I don't know, maybe there's people in here. We don't know. What else? Can we find 2 more, 3 more? Because what I'm suggesting is that our general perception of leadership is affected by a number of metaphors that we have acquired unconsciously. Let me tell you one. He's a man. We are so used to this idea that we don't even notice it. Why does a leader have to be a man? Okay, so what else? Yes?
Maybe there's a special state called white force, so it's some special kind of person.
Special kind of?
Person in a team or something like this.
Okay. Yeah. Yes?
He looks like a prince. Maybe he was like born into.
Yes. Yeah, he's so royal, right? Looks like a prince, or yeah. So status, and so on. Okay, good. So that is not Agile leadership. So when I run workshops on Agile leadership, in-house or public workshops, part of the workshop is asking people, so who would be a good Agile leader or a good leader for you? What's your definition as a group of an Agile leader? And I always end up with something like this. Okay. Now, this is half in French, because I was in Paris at the time, and half in English. It doesn't matter. But I always end up with something like this. For instance, good communicator, good listener, empathic, is able to, or she's able to give energy, to energize people, proactive, critical sense, he knows himself or herself, and stuff like that, other things, visionary, open mind, sociable, charismatic, and is able to create bonds between people. And then, of course, all of this, and also this person is humble, of course, okay? And I always see something like that. And as I usually say, I mean, if I found a person like this, I don't care about the gender, I would marry this person. Because that's such a wonderful human being, right? It's amazing, okay? It's amazing. But, the thing is, that's not a good question to ask. The question is not what kind of leader would you like to have. I think a better question is what kind of leader do you want to be? Because that's where you can make a difference. It's pointless to ask, okay, I would like to have leaders like this. No, the question is, what kind of leader do you want to be? Which kind of influence do you want to bring about in your environment? Which kind of change do you want to bring? That's a better question, because there you have power. You have the power to do something. That's a much better question. So, for me, in the kind of organization that we work in, if you think about orange or green, remember the thing about the manifesto? We ended up saying that for what we do today in the 21st century in IT or knowledge work in general, for what we do, if you remember the colors that were in the back, we need a more tealish, greenish, orangish mindset rather than a red, orange, and amber mindset. Remember that? Okay? We still need this, but we need to move over there. We need to be able to create organizations where the interconnections, Mark was talking about that. Now, the interconnections between people are what makes the living system, which is your organization. And this living system must be able to constantly adapt and evolve and rethink itself. And the only way to do that, it's like a metaphor of brain cells and synapses that are interconnected. So What I'm suggesting is that the kind of leadership that you might want to consider is a leadership in which your system, your company, your organization promotes synergistic acts of leadership in everyone. Something like this. You don't need a leader. You need people who can influence somebody for a certain amount of time, then other people take over, then other people take over, and this is constantly changing. What you want to promote is multiple synergistic, concurrent acts of leadership inside the organization. Remember the 7,000 with the 50 managers? Okay, something like that. And you need to promote safety and other things. So, what I'm saying is this leadership concept, when it's brought to what we do, is, first of all, you want an environment where everyone must feel safe, or anyone feels safe, to lead any time when it's the right time to do that. Okay? Can you imagine for a second to be able to create even a team? Let's say that you have a team of 10 people, 7 people, 5 people, whatever. But in this team, everybody feels safe to be a leader whenever it's the right time to do so. Maybe for 5 minutes, maybe for half an hour, maybe for a week. But when it's the right time, I take leadership. So everybody leads from time to time, which means that everybody follows from time to time. That's a more interesting concept. And that's why this idea of loosening the ego is so important. If you are attached to your ego, to your white horse, to your status, to your shield, to your sword, and so on, well, it's very hard that you can step back and let somebody else lead. So if everybody leads, everybody follows. And learning when to follow and when to lead is very important. Not easy, but very important. And it's also extremely important to grow other leaders. If you are a leader, if you are in a leadership position, not management position necessarily, but if you are in a leadership position because people follow you, then I believe that part of your responsibility is growing other leaders so that you can step back and let other people lead. And that takes courage, and that takes letting go of a number of things. But it works. It works because you create an environment which is much more intelligent collectively than when one single person is leading all the time. There are, of course, supporting qualities. I'm not sure how much time we have left. Not much. Okay. Well, and I don't have much more to say. Okay. There are certain qualities in a person that will help you provide a more effective influence on your environment. Oh, then, by the way you use your influence is entirely up to you. I'm talking about leadership in the context of influencing your environment and bringing change about. And then if you bring change about for your own interest or for some questionable cause, that's your problem. Okay? I'm not saying that leadership is always good or bad. Leadership is something that you can do, and how you use it, it's your moral responsibility. Okay? But there are certain qualities that can help you exercise this influence. First of all, your ability to communicate with people, for instance, creating trusting relationships, or listening, or by empathy, and so on and so on and so on. Providing a vision. Leaders who don't have a vision usually don't have followers, right? Follow me, where? I don't know. Probably not working. Okay. Trust. Mark discussed about trust already. There are other things that are part of the... What I'm trying to explain in this slide is that please, if you can, focus on your character, not on your personality. There has been a shift in the last 50, 80 years when we talk about leadership. And if you read books written 100 years ago about leadership, they would talk about the intrinsic qualities of a person that make that person a good leader. Intrinsic qualities, like honesty, for instance, or integrity, for instance. If you read about leadership these days, 90% of the books, they will teach you tricks to become more influential. It's about the personality that you build around your character, and not about your own character. So what I'm talking about here is about which kind of character traits make a good leader, not personality. Personality you can build. Character is what you are. Okay? So I'm talking about character. So this ability of taking responsibility, and, letting go a little bit about your self. Okay. But at the center of all this, and I think this will be my probably final slide, and I'll skip a couple of slides, but that's okay. At the center of all this, it's self-awareness, which I believe is a it's the key point for good leadership. So let me recap. I told you that you want to deliver value, cool. You need an organization, okay. You need leadership that creates certain type of organizations, yeah, okay. And then you have certain mindsets that produce certain kinds of leadership which are more interesting than others. Now, at the core of this mindset, in my opinion, from what I see for myself and for the people I work with, is self-awareness. Being completely aware of what you want, how you feel, what you think, and so on and so on and so on. And for a very simple reason. Because you cannot lead anyone if you cannot lead yourself in the first place. If you cannot lead yourself in the first place, you cannot lead anyone. And to be able to lead yourself, you need to be totally self-aware of who you are, what you want, how you feel, all the time. Okay? And this is essential for good leadership. This is a fundamental concept. You cannot lead anyone if you cannot lead yourself. You cannot communicate with anyone if you cannot communicate with yourself in the first place. So, I think the time is almost over, and we want to have a few minutes for questions, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip a couple of slides. This is just a set of meta practices I use to promote leadership. By the way, the slides are on SlideShare. So if you go to SlideShare, look up for my name, you find these slides and lots of other presentations. So the slides are out there. And I'll skip this, skip. And I'll also be around if you have questions. That's a recap. I will let you read the recap, but anyway, it's just what I told you. Remember to rate this session. And I'm done. So if you want to keep in touch, which I'd love to, you find me on LinkedIn, you find me on Twitter, and you find me in the hallway for the rest of the day. Okay? And thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks.
Well, thank you. That was quite informative. Definitely took some notes for me and my team. So we have time for a few questions. So I guess the first one would be, some leaders do not like to co-work with other leaders. If we promote leadership among everyone, how should we approach this problem?
Fire them. No. I'm sorry, no, that was my first automatic response. But either you take a long road of trying to, first of all, understanding the other person, understanding why this person would not let go of his or her status, whatever, and then try to make yourself clear about why it's important for the organization that we let somebody else lead. It's not a matter of formal position, it's a matter of letting people develop. If people don't develop, the organization dies. Yep.
So a quick question.
Yeah.
You've heard of Alistair Cockburn's guest leadership concept. So any differences from what you're presenting today?
Alistair and I share a lot of between what I present and his approach is the emphasis I put on the importance of self-developing as a leader. So investing a lot of time to develop yourself as a leader, understanding what that really means. Yeah.
Cool. So how can every Agile leader align with management to rethink the organization?
Good question. How can you align with management to rethink the organization? Beer? No, I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. Yeah, you need to build trust. You need to start talking on a different level. But then again, if there is one message I can give you about, because I think that the theme here is conflict or different perspectives. And the only quick suggestion I can give you about this is more important to understand the other person than try to convince the other person. Start from understanding. Start from trying to understand the other person, and then perhaps the other person will do the same with you. And then maybe you'll start really talking to each other.
All right. I do want to say thank you, everyone, for your questions. It's making my life really hard up here to try to read them through and pick. I'm going to give you two more, but
okay.
I'm going to propose that you stick around later because there's some specific questions that I think some of you might want to ask him directly. Is there any value in giving brief leadership opportunities to someone who is not ready? And related to that, are you able to just be a leader for a short time?
Okay. If you remember, when I was talking about growing leaders, that's exactly the concept. What you want to do is you want to help people who are not accustomed to leadership to give them the opportunity and the support to grow this kind of skill. Now, and I perfectly understand that some people, they do not want to have any form of leadership. And I respect that and just leave them alone. Okay? So respect people. But if you see that someone might have a spark of becoming a good leader, then what you want to do is to kindle that spark, to take care of that, to let this spark becoming a nice, warm bonfire.
Great. One last question.
Yep.
How can we learn more about these theories?
About what?
What you were presenting, so the organizations,
Drop me an email. No, I mean, there are hundreds of references about all this stuff in terms of books, workshops that you can take, conferences you can go to, coaching that you can have, and so on. So there's an entire world out there regarding leadership, and so I don't have a short answer, but I'm making myself available. If you're interested, contact me, write to me on LinkedIn, and I'll try to give you all the references I can.
Thank you so much. Can we do one more round of applause?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.